What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Artists of Data Science Happy Hour. Super excited to have all you guys here, man. It's Friday, April 30th, the end of April already, guys. Happy to have all you guys here. Hopefully, you got a chance to tune into the episode I released earlier today with Eleanor Twaddell. She wrote a book called Why Losing Your Job Could Be the Best Thing That Ever Happened to You. It's a pretty damn good book. I highly recommend checking it out. Listen to the interview if you've struggling with the layoffs during this COVID year. I think this episode would be a huge benefit to get your mindset right. um, Definitely go check that out. What's up? We got Ben Taylor back. Ben Taylor, man, how's it going? Eric, Vin's in the house. Vivian, Richard, how's it going, everyone? Ben, how you been?
Great. Dude,
So
I've been living on a plane.
I know, man, I was
Like
gonna say I've seen you been hopping around lately. Where you been going?
DC, Boston. I'm gonna be in San Francisco all week next week, Tucson Wednesday, back to San Francisco. It's like things are getting back to normal. Well,
Yeah.
I don't know if that's ever normal, but I've got my vaccine, so
Nice. Yeah, I'll be getting my vaccination at some point in the next month. They're doing it. I don't know how they're doing it in the rest of the world, but here in Winnipeg, at least, they're doing it by geographic neighborhood and location. So if you're above a certain age in this particular neighborhood, or if you work in certain industries, you get priority to go get vaccinated. And now just people like me who just stay home all day are eligible to get vaccinated. So I'm back here. We got Vivian. Vivian, how's it going? Vivian, do you want to kick us off with the question?
I don't have anything right now, but I'll think about it.
All right, right on. Greg, how's it going, man? Hey, well, I'm super excited to have all you guys here. My favorite part of the week, really. And like Ben mentioned, we get back to the new normal. I wonder, will you guys still hang around every Friday when life gets back to normal? We can go to an actual pub and do actual happy hour. Hopefully, you guys are still around.
oh man, I've been doing a ton of drinking lately.
That's awesome. Going to
Like
what
staying
is
out till 1 a.m, bar hopping in Boston.
what is your drink of choice?
So I do all the classics, but I've had so much fun. You go to like a really nice restaurant and you tell them I've had every normal drink, surprise me. And they bring like monkey business or like banana coffee, or like I had one with like dry ice in it. And so my new favorite thing is to go out to a nice restaurant and say, bring me a drink that'll surprise these people.
I like
And
that.
yeah,
I like that. When I go
I
to cocktail restaurants, that's usually my orders. It's like, just give me whatever. Just
oh
surprise.
yeah. I think an espresso martini is like a classic for me. I really like that. Or like a Mexican mule.
Nice. I haven't had Mexican mule before. That sounds very interesting. I've had the Moscow mule. I'm assuming this is just with tequila and
Yeah, it's a little sweeter.
the tequila and maybe
But
Jarritos.
I was with our CRO and he's Scottish, and he was like Scotch, and I was like, this is awful.
Yeah, man, I can't drink
And
scotch. No.
yeah, and I feel bad because I think like you don't say that to a Scottishman, you know.
Yeah.
'Cause I guess that'd be like making fun of an Irishman's like Guinness. You're like, this Guinness is awful, and that'd probably offend them.
No, not a good move. But having some craft beer here. This is a vegan coconut milkshake IPA.
Oh yeah.
Quite
See,
interesting.
why hasn't someone started a podcast called like Drunk Data Science?
Um, I mean, that's what Fridays are, at least for me. I hope I can make it the same for you guys. But yeah, man, super excited to have all you guys here. If you guys have any questions whatsoever, I'm happy to start
I
taking
do.
questions. Greg, is that
I
you?
got one.
Let's go for it, man.
So I was just thinking. We're talking a lot about the AI data science kind of tipping down. What is the driver of that, and when do you guys think data science AI won't be as exciting to talk about anymore, and what would drive that? Irrelevance maybe, or boredom
I will
of the subject.
I will tell you what will, like, it's not irrelevance that will. I think it's just it'll become so relevant that it'll become an essential part of everyone's job, right?
Yeah.
Everyone will have to use data and interface with databases or do some type of coding in order to be really truly successful in their job. So I think it's going to come to a point where maybe everyone's like a data analyst at some point, right? In some way, shape, or
Mhm.
form. But let's hear from Ben on this and see what you think.
Yeah, I think it's abstracting away. I love talking to people to say, hey, all this used to be hard. So I had a call today with, I need to look up the name of the company. Is this edge device company where it automatically builds out like a Kubernetes cluster for you? And so you literally just keep adding more edge nodes and it just magically works. And if you lose a node, and I was reminded like at the hedge fund when we had 600 GPUs, the clusters, like I spent 20% of my time doing cluster management. And so like everything's getting easier. The access is getting bigger where subject matter experts, business analysts, so that'll trickle down to like the developers. And there's a floor to this pyramid, and the floor is everyone. The floor is like literally your mom. My mom will do something that would intimidate a lot of the people on the call today. And how did she do it? She had a conversation with her house. But when you actually understand what she did in the next 5 or 10 years, you'd be like, oh, that used to be hard. And so I think that's a theme in data science. Like, look at some of the stuff that people are doing today. That used to be hard. Like you go back 10 years, like, what is it? Like the Twitter clone in 5 minutes that people are so proud of. And you're like, oh, that was cool 8 years ago.
Mhm.
I mean,
So-
inverting like a 10 by 10 matrix was probably hard. And right,
Exactly.
simplify that.
Well, huge props to Greg at Amazon. Like, man, when that lambdas shit came out, oh my gosh! Like you start playing with lambdas, it was magic. Like, so Amazon has done a fantastic job with leaning in hard on the future, and so they keep coming up with these brilliant tools like serverless and other things. Where like, are you kidding me? Like something that should have been something that used to be hard is now trivial.
Vin, what do you think? And if anybody else would like to chip in on this question, please either send me a message or give me a raised hand. But Vin, let's hear from you.
I think the next the next hype thing is quantum. I've seen a couple of companies take a stab at starting up a hype cycle on quantum computing, and it just hasn't really taken hold yet. But as soon as you start seeing quantum computing, quantum internet, even quantum storage, if they just get that working, you'll start hearing that take over the hype cycle a lot. And data science will kind of be the thing that gets better because of, according to the thought leaders and influencers and futurists. And I think we're only about a year away from that. I don't think we really have too much time before people start talking about quantum computing and start talking about blockchain getting broken by quantum computing, which is going to be a huge, huge debate. Is it or isn't it going to survive? And that's another one that you're going to hear that'll be huge. I think right now we're sitting on top of data science, machine learning, and AI just because nothing else that exciting's come out yet. But it's coming. There's a couple of other topics that they sound more mundane, but they might be more interesting coming up. I mean, anytime you talk about 5G, IoT, and you push any sort of machine learning to the edge, you solve a whole lot of problems, and that in and of itself, I mean, it's not going to be completely going away from machine learning, but when we get more concerned about devices, more concerned about the edge, then you start talking a little less about machine learning, a little bit more again. I mean, you might even shift back to a hardware discussion at that point, or who knows? But there's a couple of competitors I think that this year are going to try to take it down.
I love the quantum mention. Sorry, I was just going to geek out real quick. Quantum doesn't make things go faster. It makes things go different. And so like, we actually don't even know what these new applications are. And I didn't come up with this idea. Someone on this podcast was saying like, oh yeah, your deep learning is not going to run faster. It's different. And I think that's like the sideways. I don't know what's coming.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm actually in a quantum computing program right now. I'm almost graduating, and I'm interested too in how it can enable machine learning. But what I don't know about it is you might see another 10 years before you could see a little chip that has all of these qubits built into it. That's where you see the biggest power. And what I'm interested in, and the thing is, there are multiple mediums, there are multiple materials that you can use to build a qubit. And what I'm interested in too, in seeing is when are we going to have we're starting to have it, the quantum distribution over the cloud. Is it best to keep it there and democratize it? And then another thing that I really love about it is that when it comes to machine learning, and the way I understand it is that if you're training a car, for example, about navigating or reinforcement learning, right? So again, me trying to use layman terms, you have to train, and correct me if I'm wrong, you have to train the car. If it goes straight, is it safe or no? Proceed. If it's no, proceed, etc. Right? Then you train to go left, then you train to go right. Quantum computing helps you train in all directions at the same time. So you speed it up, because now the qubit can be either takes the value of a sphere. It could be anything, and infinite possibilities of occurrences inside of a sphere. So it's quite nice and a cool concept. It's just that because of so much noise when you build a platform like quantum chip, you have to be able to correct some of that noise and make sure that when a computer makes or a machine makes an inference, that the probability of that inference being correct is as high as possible and reliable as possible. So definitely interested in that, and it's one thing that excites me, and I'm glad you brought it up, Vin, about the future of quantum computing and how we can make everything else better, including machine learning and AI.
Yeah, I'm excited to learn more about this. So if you guys know anyone who's, maybe got a PhD in this stuff or has written or published understandable articles on this topic, let me know. I'd love to get them on the show. But I'd also recommend there's a course on LinkedIn Learning from Jonathan Reichantel, who I interviewed earlier this week for the podcast. He just released a course on quantum computing. So definitely check that out on LinkedIn Learning if you got that for free. And there's some stuff on Amazon. Amazon Prime has the Great Courses add-in, and that Great Courses add-in has some really interesting courses on quantum stuff, which I've got queued up. I'm excited to learn more about that. Shout out to our good friend Akshay. Akshay, you got a job today, my friend. Congratulations. Well, maybe it wasn't today, but you recently just got hired at tell us about it, man. Tell us about it.
Thank you so much, Harpreet, and everybody else. So I signed the offer today. I got it early this week, but I've accepted an offer with Shopify in their finance team. And thanks to Greg for helping me with the case study last time, because that was one of the interview rounds that I had to go through. Yeah, my role will be a senior auditor, and I'll be in charge of helping Shopify build a SOX compliance program for internal controls and risk assessments across different verticals. It's interesting. It's very fascinating what I'm trying in this role. It relates to something I've done in consulting before. So there's a lot of room for automation, a lot of room for data science. As we know, Shopify thrives on data. So I'm super excited to see how that goes. And yeah, we'll see. I'll keep you guys posted as I continue to learn more.
Man, congratulations. That's such good news. I'm really, really happy for you, man. Super excited for you. Really looking forward to seeing all the wonderful stuff you do in the future, man. Keep it up, dude. That's awesome. Everybody join me again and congratulating. Let's see those emojis fire off. All right, guys. Anybody else got any questions that they have? You're free to take the floor. Otherwise, we can just, chill. Ben, go for it.
I've got a question. And I'm curious how people react to this. So when it comes to hiring, you got like junior talent, senior talent, stuff like that, and you have normal job expectations. And so I'm going to be in San Francisco next week, finalizing my budget and headcounts. And one of the roles potentially that could show up is this idea that I just need someone to do whatever the hell I need them to do as fast as they can do it, even if it's impossible. And what I'm trying to get to is just like someone who's young, they're hungry, but they're almost a little crazy. And so the idea I was thinking for the role, and I apologize if people find this like super off-putting, but the thing I was thinking for the role is like post something online and just say, 72 hours, what's the craziest thing you can go and do, and come back and show it as a proposal. Because if you do it, you would be joining like an elite R&D lab with crazy budgets, crazy partners, and your salary would be like doubled or tripled depending on the budget of the lab. And so like the opportunity's there, but the level of craziness is almost unfair. So how would you go about trying to assess talent? And then I don't know, like what are your guys' thoughts with that? Is that even fair to offer to like junior talent, or do you just need to like, how do you find crazy? How do you find people that are just off the rails? Like I just want like a almost like a wild animal to just like go, and if they have to 3D print something, they 3D print something. If they have to do something on the edge, they just do it. And I'm totally fine if they don't know how to do it. Just want someone that'll do
I'm
it.
gonna defer definitely to Vin on this one first, because I know he's been writing a lot about this on LinkedIn. But just one thought that I had, like, I like that idea, like that concept. I'd probably be too dumb to apply for a job like that. But here's what I would suggest is have like a theme or a statement, like have like a statement that somebody can build this project around. So that way, at least you don't have 150 different projects that you can't compare to one another. So maybe that's something you can think of. Vin, what do you think? And then after Vin, we'll hear from Greg.
It's a hard one because I know who you're looking for. Like I've had to hire that person before, and it's usually just somebody I've come across. Like I'll have taught him in a class, or I'll run into him, in a conference or something like that. Those are the last two that I hired out. And so I know who you're looking for, and I've never had to post that job. I've always kind of stumbled across somebody that fits. But if I was going to post it to try to get people to apply for it, I'd get creative with how I posted the job. I don't even know that I would post it as like a job on LinkedIn or any of those sites. I might just come up with a challenge, like an open challenge. Hey, this would be fun, cool thing to work on. Not even say that there's a job behind it, and see who runs after it. Because you're right, there's like a side of that that's not fair. And dangling the job and all the perks and everything else that could come with it, it's almost not fair to do, especially to junior talent, because they will run face first into it. And maybe it's right for them, maybe it isn't. And if you don't know them well enough, it's hard for you to make that judgment call either. So I would almost, put out a challenge, expect it to take a couple of months for people to do, whatever creative challenge that you can think of to throw out there. And you'll meet some people along the way. You'll be able to get to know people a little bit better. And that'll be your selection process. That'd be my best guess.
No, I think you're completely right that you've already run into these people. You kind of know who they are. And I think I'm kind of hitting on, I hate the idea of having a lot of junior talent go and bust their asses for like 3 days when that's not them right now, because that's not really fair either. But I also don't have 2 months to figure it out. I've got like 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's tough to hire somebody like that quick. That's a hard person to source, because I know exactly what you're looking for. Somebody who can really, who does think sideways, and not the buzzword way of thinking, but I mean truly thinks sideways and has zero fear, hasn't ever failed before in their life, and will legitimately throw themselves into stuff they have no business thinking they could solve. And they're the kind of person that comes out the other end somehow with a workable solution, even if it's not the final thing. It's kind of the halfway point, or at least a good starting point. Yeah, I like I said, I know what you're looking for. It's hard.
Let's hear from Greg. Then I think Jennifer had her hand up, and then we'll hear from Rena afterwards.
Yeah, I echo what Vin is saying, and it seems like you're going to have to tailor it, kind of like some sort of interview that you're tailoring for the candidates. I'm assuming that just being clear in the position description itself could be a start in terms of what people should expect. But I'm assuming you're looking for somebody who's going against the grain, right? So kind of like, to Vince's point, if you create some sort of competition or challenge where most conventional knowledge is thinking that, oh, this way of doing business is the right way, and you're looking for the person who will say, oh, that's bullshit, it will break, there's a fault to that, I'll tell you why. Or you're kind of looking for that sweet spot of somebody who's done something crazy before and failed, and understand why it failed, and understand what it would do, what he or she would do to correct it. So it's kind of hard, right? I don't know, the best thing I can tell you, maybe it's tailor that interview to kind of surface this craziness, but also be blunt in the job description that you will post out there, or even employ different method to go look for these folks, where they are they using the World Wide Web. So what are the projects they worked on, or things like that. So it's kind of like, you're gonna have to do a combination of all of that. How do you look for that person? what do you tell that person so they can be clear about, what you're looking for, and also what have that person done before too, and also how do you tailor that interviewing process so you can surface these kind of craziness out of them. So it's a combination of a lot of things, in my opinion.
The job description is so hard because it's literally like first month you're doing reinforced learnings on heartbeat data coming out of the ICU. Next month you're building a custom hyperspectral camera, and like the next month you're buying furniture at Home Depot and you're like racing out to the desert. And like it's one of those things, like the job description is almost undefined, but the obsession, I could bring up some of these examples, but some of the examples really aren't that important because they could change.
Jennifer, you had your hand up. I don't know if that was.
Yeah, I went through that type of an interview where it started out. It did have a job description. It's very nebulous, and you want someone who can handle ambiguity. But the point in time when you knew that you went from resume into being part of the interview was when you got an email that said, you've got 48 hours to complete this task. And that was literally a phase of the interview, and everybody was graded on the same task, same 48 hours. I actually really appreciated it and have reused that in other interview processes because it demonstrates the intensity. It was something that should have taken 2 months to do. And that weeds through a heck of a lot of the mediocre, if I can put it that way. So I'd actually encourage you to do that, but start with the job description and source the resumes since you have an idea of the skill sets and the level of maturity that you're looking for, but absolutely go into it with competition.
Rena?
Thanks for that.
Hi, yeah, I've spent quite a lot of years in, forgive me, I'm from Manchester, England. I spent quite a lot of years working with students and doing entrepreneurship. One of the great things about Manchester is they're never afraid of tech at all. So there's an organization in Manchester called Pro Manchester, and they have an interview stage process. It's a competition which comes around every year. They put everybody in a room for 8 hours. And they have a stand-up session, which is they'll have 5 random items, a spoon, a charger lead, all sorts of things. And then they'll say, right, stand up and come up with an inventive idea with this. By the end of that day, they cluster people together and they make those individuals come up with a business concept and raise funds for a charity within that day, locked in that room. And they have to come up with their own ideas, own concepts, and go with it, fly with it. Within a day, they've got to fly with it. Second stage is you go away on your own, come up with your own business concept, and that gets assessed. Third stage is clear pitching. So it's worth trying.
That's interesting. And I think those types of events attract a certain type of person.
Yeah, I mean, I spent about 5 years with young entrepreneurs. I helped businesses, anything from nature walks and talks to an obese dummy, which is a fully launched for NHS ambulance services, for training purposes. The big thing in the UK was they couldn't move obese people. So he has this obese dummy, and that's really gone far.
The other thing I was just thinking of is sometimes talking to professors, you just say, who's the most interesting student you've had in the last 5 years or like 10 years? And they find out like, well, actually this random kid who's now over here.
Yeah, they're the ones that the professor, well, we call them academics. They're the ones that the academics never spot. Because in universities, you'll see the ones who are teachers' pets, which the academics will spot and push forward. I've seen a lot of academics elevate students in the past simply because they volunteer for everything an academic asks for, whereas the most inventive one is already starting their business at university. So we have a thing called Dragon's Den in the UK, and some of the entrepreneurs that came to speak, one guy took a teddy bear and put an iPhone in it, called it iTeddy, and made millions. One guy had the entire rugby team doing doorman services for nightclubs whilst they were at university. On graduation day, he was turning over £100,000 and thought he should start taking it seriously. So there are unique entrepreneurs, but what I used to do was run 5-day boot camps for students, open up the idea, give them the ability to put a pitch forward. They were allowed on the 5-day boot camp. By the end of the 5 days, everybody was floored because there were so many ideas thrown around the room.
That's
Give
super
it a
fun.
go.
I think you're exactly right that they don't always do well in the academic setting.
No, they never do. I'm like that. I'm wired wrong.
Actually, I was reminded I was giving a talk at a university. This is right when deep learning hit, so they don't know anything. There's a kid on the front row. He was like in the middle of dropping out of college, and he's like, "What about this? What about that? What about Siamese nets?" And he's asking all these questions. I'm like, what's going on over here? And like the market just gobbled him up, and he's at Microsoft now. But like he dropped out.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm a little bit like that because I was stood in a rugby stadium trying to convince a European funder on how to make hydrogen power from renewables energy. Now, if you knew me by discipline, I'm an accountant and a computer scientist by nature, nowhere near power and energy. So yeah, it's a really bizarre way of looking at the box. Will be quite chatty with new ideas if you put them in a think tank.
Sounds like an awesome place to be,
But
Tor.
they were terrible at business management, though.
Tor, I saw you had your hand up, and if anybody has questions or comments, go ahead and let me know. But I saw Tor's hand up. I don't know where he is. There you go.
I'm right here. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, I was just want to comment. I think like all the things have been said so far is good, like defining the job role. You kind of do that first passing. Technically, what I did when I was hiring a person into my organization, I was kind of looking for the same thing. I needed somebody that was better than me, somebody that knew what they were doing. So what I did, I had 5 different cases that I presented. So we went through the normal interview stage, just back and forth, qualifications, paperwork, all that stuff. But then I had 5 tasks, which are problems that I was actually facing in my day. And I gave them those 5 tasks and I said, please explain to me how you will resolve this. And then I brought out the good old famous flip chart. Now draw it to me. And the reason for the drawing was to see how they were able to kind of combine the problem, trying to show it visually, and then after discuss the problem. And those interviews took time, but it also gave a very good indication of who was capable of kind of logically working on it, also presenting it, and to draft it so that it made sense. And that worked really well for me. The person I ended up hiring, she talked a lot of stuff. I didn't have a clue what she was saying halfway through the interview. Obviously, much better than me, and I never regretted it to this day. And that was the kind of person that I wanted because I needed somebody that I like to give responsibility and let people get it done. And she would do it. But if she couldn't, she would come back and she would have 3 options available for me. I couldn't do what you're asking for because it's illegal. And here are 3 alternatives you can choose from. So that was just my way of trying to find that kind of person. Exactly. I mean, not in ML or AI, but in a different field, but to have that, they can do things on the spot, they can think on their feet, and they're able to communicate and present it and to understand what you were actually talking to them about.
Ben, hopefully
I have a
good suggestions there. Yeah, go for Greg. If anybody has any questions, let me know. I know there's a bunch of new people here. I see Richard and Martin and Jacob and Arthur. So if you guys got questions, let me know. I'll go ahead and I'll pull you guys up, but go for it, Greg.
I just have a follow-up question for Ben. If you were to rank the top 2 skills from that person, would it be someone who's aware of the technologies here, able to project into the future and come up with this crazy business idea that nobody was thinking about? Or is it somebody who's able to build a proof of concept by having some technical skills, and then you go and test that and validate it, and it's good. So what is the top one?
More of the proof of concept, because I can feed them with all of these projects, and I just need them to do the projects where they're really not that academic. It's more just you're gonna run into walls and you have to break through those walls. And if you can't break through, you have to escalate. But if you escalate and I find out that it was Googleable, if that's even like, if I find out that it was something like that, then that would be which I found out before with data scientists, like, yeah, the answer is no. And then you go Google, you're like, actually it's yes.
You just need somebody that's resourceful. I think that's like the most underrated skill ever.
Yeah.
Resourcefulness.
An obsessive rule breaker.
Yeah. I like that.
It's tough. It's a challenge.
Oh yeah. But yeah, so let's see if anybody else got any questions. Like I said, a bunch of new faces here. Happy to see all you guys here. Makiko's also in the house. What's up, Makiko? How you doing? Dave, Nisha and Mark, I hope you guys got your package that I sent to you, the books from Gilbert I. Kellenboob. I mailed it like 2 weeks ago. So let's see if Canada knows how to send mail. But yeah, man, if anybody has any questions, go for it. I'm opening the floor up. So let's see. Let's start with Richard. Richard, any questions?
Yeah, I'm thinking of something. It's really a data science career progression question. So I've now like run the function and built teams twice, and I am not really sure what comes next. I can't really see myself being some VP who just sits around arguing about resources in a spreadsheet all day. But I really like teaching, mentoring, leading teams. I'm not sure like what comes next. I feel like it's less developed, less discussed than in other fields.
I was wrestling with the same thing earlier this week because I used to think that I wanted to be like a chief data officer or chief data scientist.
Yeah, yes, or like VP innovation. But then I talk to them and I'm like, all they do is like hire consulting firm. Like, oh, that's lame. Like,
yeah, like managing, I think managing people is extremely messy. That's not something that I feel like I want to do. Like, I don't want to manage people. I'd rather, manage capital or assets. And I mean, manage data, I guess that's managing a asset. But yeah, I'm interested to hear what people think. I mean, Ben, I see that you're unmuted, so go for it, man. Tell us your thoughts.
Yeah, so I've been a chief data scientist for HireVue, built out a team, and that's fun. Like, you get to handpick your talent and you go do stuff, build a product. And then I got the itch to do a startup, so that can be exciting. It's a real ass kick. But I think I've noticed for some people, they try to take themselves into innovation labs. So after they've kind of built a team, then they get excited about, well, how do I go find like some type of like Bell Labs behavior or incubator? Because those types of places attract crazy people. Like the engineers you pull, like a Data Robot, we're starting like Data Robot Labs, and the engineers that are being pulled into that are nuts. Like, they're not normal people. And so that for me, and I shouldn't share this publicly, but I will, at the risk of jinxing this project. But I'm doing this to kind of tease you into some of the projects that you could be working on in an innovation lab. So right now, I'm working on a partnership between BRP in Canada and NVIDIA, and we're putting together a letter of intent. They're going to go build out a custom 300 horsepower off-road vehicle. We'll get a professional athlete like Travis Pastrana, Ken Block to go drive that. We'll go down, they'll have AI edge devices, thermal cameras, faulting. We'll go down to Moab for a week. We'll invite 50 executives down. We'll drink wine. We've got huge budgets. There's AI involved there for sure. But the partnerships, the people you meet. And so for me, that's my drug of choice. And if you have these types, and so if you can find yourself in an innovation position, because you already figured out how to manage people, you already figured out how to build a product, you already figured out how to ship a product. And so I think the end point there's be selfish. Be very, very selfish about what wakes you up in the morning, what makes you up in the evening. And it may not be something that pays the bills, but if you can find out a way to pay the bills. But my track doesn't work for everyone, but that's how I've been very selfish.
Actually, it sounds like you're saying like focus on the kinds of people that you would get to be with,
yes,
as a form of advancement. So like, okay, like you're constantly not leveling up in some sort of weird networky way, but just like, oh, these are more interesting people that I really connect with, and we
They'll-
want it like they empower you to do better things, more impact.
Yeah, I've noticed for me, maybe I screwed this up for me forever. I don't like mentoring because I used to like in the past, but it's like an emotional drain where if you can work with these types of people, who are the people where that energy and that respect in every week, like who are the high intense people that will feed you and allow you to level up? And the funny thing is, there's a good chance they're all smarter than us, and that's fine. But they're a lot of fun to work with, and they do really. So I care much more about impact, like society. That's why we're working on a hospital network partnership right now, where we're going to be saving lives. We're going to be having medical publications, and it's not academic. Like, yeah, the academic stuff, but this stuff is like in a production hospital, real people attached, patient centric, and we got video crews to send down, people to interview, and so I think more about impact. What's the impact you can have, environment, society, where you can die in a couple of years and know that there's a eternal impact that for good.
Yeah, man. Like hard work is no substitute for who you work with and what you work on, right? I don't know if you're much of a reader at all, Mark, but Richard. There's a book by
Sorry, Rashad, close.
there's a book by Safi Bacall called Loon Shots, and he breaks down these like Bush Veil rules for innovation, and then he talks about this one aspect of it's called face separation, where you separate your soldiers from your artists. And then soldiers, they're usually ones that are in like, they're in manufacturing, they're in marketing, product design, product delivery, whatever. They're the ones that are responsible for getting products on time, on budget, on spec consistently to the customers. And then there's the artists who are responsible for coming up with crazy, wacky new ideas and testing them out, kind of like that innovation lab concept that Ben's talking about.
So I'm an artist.
Yeah. I mean, I'm clearly not, given the name of the podcast. But I mean, I'm gonna punt this one over to Vin because I know he's probably got a lot to say on this. But if anybody else would like to jump in on this, please go ahead and let me know in the chat. So just raise your hand and I can call on you next. Vin, go for it.
I've had pretty much every career path possible, so I can tell you what all of them are, but I can't tell you, which one's the one that's going to make you happy. So I went the corporate route. I did like a small business, washed horribly, and decided to go like 180 degrees the other direction and do the corporate route. Did the ladder climbing in corporate. It's satisfying from a like level up perspective. It's almost like you're getting high scores, and you can measure high score with the size of your team. You can measure it by your salary. You can measure it by your budget. You can measure it by your impact on product. You can measure it by, everyone that was around me had different measurements of their score. So in the corporate route, that's kind of where it is, you look at impact, and that's almost like a secondary thing if you do the corporate advancement, corporate ladder. But some people do go down that road. Then I went down the, I'm going to start my own thing. I'm going to do my own thing and build amazing products. And that's a lot of fun. Hopping from company to company, just finding companies that are interested in building out products that are cool, interesting, going to use the technology in a better way. That's a lot of fun, but you run out of companies that are willing to do interesting work pretty quickly, unless you get into the strategy side, which is where I went next. And then I did strategy growth, trying to teach businesses to do interesting and monetize cool projects and products. That's a lot of fun as well, but it's a whole lot less, like I don't touch the product as much as I'd like to. But if it wasn't for this role, nobody else would either. And so there's, almost like a vicarious thrill to be able to say, I made part of that, or I made that possible. And so I've done all of those. And right now I'm trying to figure out sort of the new creator role, where I'm a business creator. I still do the strategy side and I still build value for businesses working inside of them. But there's also this interesting thing of creating, like I'm building communities in some cases. I'm building content, more of a generic creator where I'm building content, but I'm also building communities and sort of talking people through going into a different direction, whether that's in their career or thinking about how they can utilize technology in new, interesting ways. And so there's this kind of, fourth option that's emerging now that I don't think any of us have a great handle on in the tech field, where there's almost like this technical creator that has one foot in business and one foot in, I don't know, like not influencer, but you know what I'm talking about.
Community
like
building, I suppose.
What's that?
Community building, I suppose. That's what
That's
it
as
sounds
close
like.
as I can get to putting words on top of it. Yeah. And I can tell you all of them were satisfying for a little while, but it's almost like as soon as you see the game, as soon as you see the mechanics behind it, it's almost like as soon as you have that revelation, it gets boring and I got to find something that I haven't figured out yet.
Absolutely love that attitude. Makiko, let's hear from you.
Hey, yeah. So I've had the benefit to, according to my family, job hop from many different roles. But essentially, like I've kind of worked in a lot, like as a data analyst, as a data scientist, machine learning engineer, built part of a startup, have kind of failed at it sort of a lot, you know, and sort of all these different things. And I think I feel like the common myth in the US especially is that like, and I mentioned this in the comments, but that like growth has to come from like progressing up the ladder. When the reality is that I think growth and enjoyment and fulfillment can come from like not just growth up the ladder. In some companies, they will do a distinction between like management versus an IC track. So you can continue growing as an IC, but also there's like growth of like your work. So if you're, for example, working as a consultant or like developer relations, or you're doing this proof of concept work, like that's another form of growth where it's just a growth of your portfolio of projects that you can do. When I was working at Autodesk, we had a lot of people who literally their job was just to be makers, like use any combination of like Autodesk software, 3D printing, 3D modeling, combine it with like machine learning, combine it with robotics. Your goal is just to showcase everything that Autodesk can do. So they were like technical contributors, but not necessarily like contributing to the internal team, right? All their entire goal was to just do cool stuff and to talk about it. So that's like so there's growth of that work as well. You know, but also too, like there's kind of the growth that, you know, a bunch of people who are here on the call experience that of being your own sort of like entrepreneur, you know? So I think there's a lot of like sort of like really good options and you can kind of like mix and match them however you will. And I think that's kind of really nice. But I think the key thing is that like understanding that, you know, for a lot of people, for them, they might like to progress up the ladder. But I think there's a lot of us who, you know, especially with quarantine COVID, like it changed my mentality where instead of constantly trying to chase these jobs and it was exhausting, instead I was like, what do I like realistically really like? It's like, okay, I like developing and building things like internally and like part of the product. I don't necessarily love constantly trying to figure out algorithms. And I also don't like the idea of doing like management. So, and the nice thing about working in tech is that you can actually, it's the beautiful part for, you know, for the most part, is if all you want to do is just do like cool projects, work on cool stuff as an IC, and even find ways to be an entrepreneur on the side, it is just totally doable. Totally doable. So I think that's just like kind of my sort of like food for thought is that growth and progression can come from a number of different places. It doesn't have to just come from the ladder. It can also come from, you know, personal work and all that. And there are definitely jobs out there that, you know, opportunities, not just jobs, but in general opportunities that will line up with that.
I'll say real quick too. I think one of the problems with jobs is most of us on this call, if you look at the activities you do during the day in a distribution, a lot of it's just garbage, just stuff where you're just like, man, like I could find someone else to go do this and they're the cheapest person on the planet. And so the thing I love is like, how do you shut off things that you think aren't possible, like answering your email or like discovery on partnerships? Like how can you shut off stuff where you truly only work on the things that you have a unique passion for and a unique talent for? And I'm a huge fan of like, I don't give a crap about my weaknesses. I only do if they could impact my strengths. So if I'm having trouble with project management or dropping balls on emails, that could impact something that's very important to me. But I could also just hire that away or figure there. The funny thing about businesses is like, there aren't really, we think about rules and process, but when it comes to like top line budget stuff, you can just make shit up. So like, if you're like, look, I actually don't want to do this. And I understand that this is not something that is known or accepted in the industry, but I don't care. I have this idea to carve away useless work off of my plate. And I think that that could be something that you could get really excited about. How much of your day job is garbage? And it's not an insult to you, it's the reality we all deal with. Carve that garbage away and then do what you're truly great at.
The shallow work.
I get bored quickly. I get bored quickly. And also I always kind of measure from time to time if I'm challenged. And there's always that project or those projects that I do that have a high potential for failure. And I go, oh crap, if I don't deliver, I won't get to that next level. And it's scary and it's also exciting. So if I don't feel like I'm moving in that direction, to me, I'm not growing when things start to get repetitive. So there's a lot of that. So if you're feeling like you're doing things that are not helping you learn something new, start looking for that next step that will challenge you. It's kind of like I look at some of my projects, like I go, crap, what am I doing here? I've heard technical folks tell me things that I go, I went Googling him because they got frustrated with me because I was asking questions to trying to understand what they're saying. So those are the things where when you explore how fragile these projects are, to me it's exciting because if I succeed, then it's good, and I wouldn't have it any other way. So that's the way I kind of measure where I am.
Yeah, it sounds like there's almost two paths that you can go, right, in your career. There's one path. I mean, there's probably several more, but let me just collapse it down into two general types of paths. One path could be managing people, where maybe you are now just in charge of helping people manage how they do their time or whatever, right? Like that's just labor management, using labor as a form of leverage. And then the other kind is much more you're putting much more accountability into what you do. You're taking risks, you're taking big risks under your own name. If you fail, you reap if you fail, you pay the consequences. If you win, then you reap the reward. So there's these two different types of paths, where one is probably more risk, more accountability, but the payoff is much more larger, and that is doing new, crazy, interesting things, where maybe you're working with just a nuclear team, 2 to 3 people doing cool stuff, and outsourcing a lot of the drudge work to maybe other people, like Ben is suggesting, right? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm hearing the summary of like the artist, sort of the experimenter, and then the delivery focus, and then sort of how much ownership you have of the product being inside or outside of others' firms, and then doing your own firm. So I see those. I'm imagining 3 axes with the plot points on it or something. Yeah, it's pretty eye-opening. I enjoyed every answer because to try to think of unique ways to combine those, we don't really necessarily think about them. I feel like a lot of the best data scientists I've met have what it would be entrepreneurs in another life. But the thing is, they really it's kind of difficult because you don't necessarily own the data, if they want to do just the analysis stuff, right? But that mindset of the approach of going out there and grabbing things and like solving whatever problem is in front of you and always pursuing new challenges, right? Very entrepreneurial, but there's a fundamental tension, I think, between I'm a lone wolf data scientist on my own and like actually having access to the really interesting data sets that are often trapped in companies in silos. And that's, I think, the tension that underlied my question. I think you guys all helped answer it. Thanks.
Yeah, I think data scientists definitely, for sure, intrapreneurs in a sense, right? Where you can think of your management as your angel investors when you're doing new things inside of a company. But I mean, if we're data scientists, if data is an asset, we kind of are asset managers in a sense, right? Maybe we're not given, maybe some of us are lucky enough to be data scientists who are using their skills to trade options, and you are managing capital. That's a huge form of leverage. But if you're managing people, that's probably messy, sloppy. But we manage data, which is an asset, and that could have definitely high leverage. Ben, go for it.
I was going to say another thing I like, Rashad, is if I take you and if I throw you into an entirely different department, like I'm going to put you in sales if you haven't been there before, I'm going to put you in marketing, you're going to be drowning like the first 4 to 6 months. Be like, oh my gosh, like there's all these new jargon and terms and things they care about in process. But the really fun thing when you start doing that a few times, whichever one you're in, it doesn't matter what you're in. If I throw you into marketing right now, when you ramp up on the way they think about things, the way to do things, you're going to bring a unique perspective that only you can bring. Because a lot of these people here, they're like lifelong marketers. They're not going to see the world the way you see it. And that is true of any domain you're thrown into. And so I celebrate that. So I'm in marketing. I don't know where I'm going to be in 5 years, but I'm having a lot of fun in marketing. And then I was going to throw an example of breaking the rules. We'll see if I can actually pull this off. But like one rule, I want to meet with our senior VP of talent on Monday. And I want to propose hiring my sister-in-law for my executive assistant, which is like a big no-no. That is like, are you shitting me? Like, you can't do that for every reason under the sun, because nepotism, like, can you actually fire her? Like, no, like I will fire her. But like, what if I'm having an affair and she reads my email? It's like, no, we already talked about that too. Like, don't worry, we figured this all out. And I don't really care about process and template and rules. And that's not really an inspiring, motivating example. I'm just saying, like, a lot of the rules and the way people think about things aren't the required way for you to go about it.
Yeah, I mean, and to add to that, like, I remember I was watching this YouTube video from this guy. I think he's on YouTube as like Google tech lead, ex Facebook, ex Google, ex husband. What he's kind of, it's pretty funny. Like, you should watch some of his videos. But he pointed out something really interesting when he, I guess, got fired from Google, or was it Facebook? I don't remember. He made a video about it when it happened. But he was saying that like people sort of, they have this kind of like one track mind about like labeling people in their careers, right? Like, there's this idea of that you are either an entrepreneur or you are a company guy, gal, they, right? You are a leader or you are like a follower. You are a teacher or you are a doer, right? And so he pointed out that, you know, people have a lot of these sort of like kind of misconceptions, these sort of like false dualities, you know? And the thing is, like, you know, in your work and the work that you do and how you approach your career, you can kind of mix and match them. And a lot of times it will seem very like risky at first, but it will just kind of only like pay dividends. Like for me, for example, I'm just going to be honest, I am probably not, okay, I know I'm not the, even like the top 10% of data scientists or ML engineers. I'm actually probably a pretty terrible engineer. But and that frustrated my mom because she you know, she's Japanese, she immigrated to the country and all that. So she's like, why can't you just settle down at a job for 3 years? Just 2 years, aim for 2 years, right? But for me, what was important was getting the kind of experiences I wanted to work on the kinds of projects. And that paid dividends in that, like, now when I go to companies, a lot of times they're looking for something different or unique. They want like a nice little sort of, they don't always like have to have a neat story. Some of the roles that I like to target, or some of the opportunities I like to target, whether they're projects, they like people that are a little bit different. They think a little different. You can't just sort of tidy them up. So sometimes, you know, engaging in sort of this like going against the grain of this like this false dichotomy of duality of the like you have to be one or the other. No, you could actually be all three. You know, you could be all two. You can mix and match it. You could do some formal work, or you could do stuff on the side. You know, it doesn't have to be that way, but it's really fascinating because I run up against that a lot with like the older generation of my family, where they're like, you do XYZ to ensure life. And it's almost like they're kind of following the rules as opposed to like following the principles, which is, yes, at some point you need some amount of money. Yes, at some point, obviously, you know, you need a roof over your head. Yes, at some point, it would be nice to not like hate the people you're with, you know, that you work with. But there's a lot of things that are a little bit more like flexible in terms of how you approach it. So that's something to like always kind of ask yourself is like, are you, when you're looking at a situation or, you know, you have a decision in front of you, are you sort of forcing this like dichotomy on yourself of choice? Or is it actually something that could be more blended? Or, you know, you could do like multiple, like why not both, right?
It's actually an excellent point, because we do have a tendency to say it's one thing or the next thing, but actually it doesn't have to be that way, right? There's never a dichotomy. There's a bunch of gray area in between that you need to entertain. Talent stacking is you know, the way to go. If I could summarize a bit of what Mikiko was saying, it sounded like there's a big push there for talent stacking and just becoming the kind of person that you cannot go to school to become. Awesome. That was, and I just realized, dude, I've been calling you Richard. Your fucking name is Rashad. Man, dude.
Rashad. Yep. It's a Pakistani name.
Well,
with an English spelling.
Yeah, my bad, dude. I should
No
have
worries.
seen that. So next question I got up here is actually from Eric, and then we'll go to Nisha. And if anybody else wants to just hop in at any point, man, you guys just unmute yourself and go for it. Don't wait for me to call you.
All right, this is just another like explain it like I'm 5 question. So our SQL partition over, what is, I actually don't really understand what partition over lead lag is actually doing. I think it's a window function thing, and what is being partitioned. And if you can explain it either with an example or in terms of like Excel or Python, like pandas, that would be super.
Well, I do know it's a window function type of thing, and I do know that you use it mostly with columns. It's like a group by 4 columns type of thing, if I can say that. But if anybody can explain it like
I could
we're
try.
all 5, yeah, go for it, man. Please do.
Yeah, partitioning is equivalent. It's like doing a group by, but not actually reducing the number of rows and aggregating. If you were to do a lag, you would need a partition and order by. So ordering, if you do lag lead, it's based on the order, and then the partition, it restarts within each partition. So it's like group A, if you partition by like letter and you're ordering by number, let's say, then you have like your column, it's like A, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or something like that, and then B, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 if you like that.
Okay, so
does that make sense?
So yeah, so so like I said, the partition, I think the part that's going to stick with me is like it's a group by, but doesn't it's not like aggregating. You're just like drawing. So when you draw that partition, is that the window?
Yes,
it's like the
part
piece
of a window
that you're like looking at.
Yeah, window function fundamentally does that. When you say window, when it is a window function, right? That's like the class of functions in SQL that does group by like things without actually reducing the number of rows. Yeah, partitioning is how it is grouped, and then ordering, it depends on what you're doing. It doesn't always apply, but
so
ordering is applied within each partition.
So is the over clause the way that you specify the things that you are that you're partitioning based on? Sorry, bad.
It's like do X over these groups.
Okay, cool. That's really helpful. Thank you.
So it's like here's a column. Look at this column, and then make some judgment on this column and return the result of that judgment into a new column type of thing. If I was to simplify that into English-ish. Yeah, man.
Yeah, create a new column. Yes.
You guys go take Danny's course. Danny Ma has a course on SQL. Go take that. He can probably explain it. Nisha, you are up next. If anybody else has questions, go ahead and let me know.
Hey everyone, I just wanted to ask, in the teams that you have worked with before, consisting of both analysts and data scientists, do you happen to have a place for peer reviewing work? So one analyst essentially builds the project, brainstorms with their boss at the initial phase, and then goes and codes it out, and then we have the end result. Does that get peer reviewed? And if so, what kind of things do you usually look for when it's an analyst-based project and when it's a data science-based project? How do you do it? I'm just looking for how things run in other people's industry.
That's a good question. I mean, I've done like legit just code reviews. Like, let me just, I'll have somebody look at my code and say, hey, just make sure this makes sense. But usually that write tests and get it sent to QA. That's typically what I do. It's not the good practice. Mark, go for it.
At my job, I straddle kind of both sides, the product side and the analytics side. And so I have to wear different hats for my code review. So if I'm on the analytics side, typically what I'm checking for, and I first quickly assess, like, what's the priority? Like, do you need to just get this out real quick and you say make sure there's no red flags? Or are we trying to build something scalable that we reuse again? And so I'll go through the code, and the first thing I'm going to check is like, are your assumptions correct? Are you doing any like statistical boo-boos? And are there any kind of mistakes with the data? And then after that, the other things I'm checking is like, all right, are you writing like our code that's like easy to read, and try and do some like coaching or mentoring for my colleagues on that. And then also like any times like, hey, like your code, like repeating a bunch of times, like here's a great place to put a function or something like that. And then especially because we're a startup, we're trying to like scale our insights. I'm like, hey, I keep on seeing these analyses real quick. Like this would be a great place to create a function that we can use for like our own internal packaging. And then going on to the product side, that's when I'm more so getting code review, because I'm still learning on the software engineering side. But what I'm getting for that side, the code review I'm receiving is, am I following software engineering best practices? Am I making sure that I'm keeping things modular? For that, am I integrating with their code base correctly? Am I running unit tests for that? And then what they're really, really focused on is like readability and maintainability of the code. And so like, if someone had to go look at my code, or like someone's on call and it broke, can they quickly assess it? And that's what they're more so caring about. So that's from my job at a startup, that's the perspective I'm looking at.
Vin, let's hear from you. And then Mikiko, Mikiko, if you want to go right after Vin.
Why don't you do Mikiko first?
Okay.
And then because I'm going to probably over answer the heck out of this question. So let me go last.
Yeah, for sure. Mikiko, go for it.
Yeah. So, okay. So first thing is that it's always good to have like a standard template or process for how you're evaluating work. So typically when I evaluate the work of a data analyst, the most important part is that typically analytical work, it's meant to answer business questions. And more importantly, when you present it, I have yet to have an experience where the business partner did not challenge me on, first off, the definitions that I used, the how I calculate the metrics, the data, and then fourthly, how I incorporated sort of like additional business logic. So those are the four things. With data analytic work, it can be a little bit tricky because people have a number of ways for how they present it. So typically it's good to, you want to have a place to version control your SQL queries or your code. That's really important in Git. Secondly, I'd like to say we write unit tests on data analytic work, but that would be a lie. That would be great, but I'm going to be honest, it doesn't happen a whole lot. But what does need to happen though, is typically if you are doing analytic work and because you're communicating with business partners, usually there's going to be some kind of, dashboard or visual analysis. So having some kind of rules or not rules, guidelines or good principles figured out before that is really helpful. If you're doing a dashboard, you always want to check to see first off, are the filters actually working? And you want to compare the values that you're getting against like certain common, not common use cases, but either through a matter of spot checking. So for example, if you're doing a sales report, you want to compare like the sales report in like Tableau to what the sales numbers are in like Salesforce, right? You should always be doing that kind of due diligence. It would be nice if people went through that entire checklist all at once, but typically they don't. But those are the things you look for when you're doing like a data science project or like a model. So if it's experimentation, we always ask that we have the experimental design connected, like attached. Like we need to understand like what was the methodology. First off, did you calculate the power sizes? Like, did you calculate power and like the sample size? Did you figure out the like assignment scheme? What metrics or analyses were you intending to use? That stuff is important on top of some of the other things. And if you're doing a data science model, it's very easy to just take data and like throw it at a model. It's incredibly easy. So, in the beginning of time when people were not like as sort of aware of the pitfalls of data science modeling, you could kind of get past with that. But that's really bad practice. And so the things you want to definitely look at are, first off, making sure you understand what's going on in the data. Because sometimes, for example, you can have data that is repetitive or messy, or you can have data leakages. So having an understanding of how that was handled. Secondly is definitely testing the code, as like Mark talked about. That's like super, super important. And then I'd say thirdly is the evaluation metrics that were used. Yeah, those are the things that like typically check. But I'd say that the main core differentiator between like what you would check for a data science project versus a data analytic project is the communication medium that you're using. For data science projects, it's nice if there's some kind of interpretability tool, but the reality is a lot of interpretability tools, even then there's a little bit of like magic going on underneath. So you can't say that they're like fact, but when you're communicating with a business partner, just because you think something is very intuitive does not in fact mean that it is intuitive. And more importantly, if you make assumptions, you need to like connect the assumptions in a very like logical way. Yeah.
It sounds like a lot of this stuff fits under the umbrella of like ML ops or AI ops types of things. So that's definitely very, very interesting. Vin, I know you said you want to go last. I'm going to go to Greg first, and then we'll hear from Vin. And in the meantime, I've got time for one more question after this. So if anybody has a question, go ahead, put it in the chat. Send me a message. Let me know. Greg, go for it, and then we'll go to Vin.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm more of a on the output side of it, where I don't really care about the code, where I work with the person building the code. But what I do is take a look at the output and validate that it's right, and understanding who the final audience is going to be in terms of downstream, subscribers to whatever I'm building in terms of product. So for example, I have use cases where I've created brand new pipelines, and I've partnered with data engineers who are grilling me about business processes to make sure that if we're adding this column, these attributes into this giant table that we're storing into Redshift or whatever, we want to understand why these columns were selected. So that person, we have a mechanism where we're creating visibility and properly documenting what that output needs to be. And also for each and every columns, I'm writing the business logic behind it, where the source of truth data needs to come from. And also once we have that, we test the code to look at the output to see what it looks like. And then if it doesn't look right, we would kind of figure out what to change, and until we're satisfied with the results. And then, the key to that too is setting up some sort of mechanism for what we call, you're hearing those automated tools now that's called observability. To me, data changes in these kind of pipelines because business rules might change or business processes might change. And you're realizing what you were collecting before is no longer being collected the proper way. So you want to have a way to kind of capture those and make corrections. But at the end of the day, at the front end, if you're the person coding, you have to have great relationship with the people who will use your tool or your product, and making sure that the documentation is sound. And when any changes happen, that document is also updated to reflect the most recent changes, including the code change that you do. So
a lot of documentation, a lot of tracking, a lot of experiments. Before we get to Vin, to hear from Vin, I just noticed that Christian is here. Shout out, Christian. I know you got some good news to share with us, so stick around so you can share that with us. But Vin, let's hear your response to this.
Makiko killed it, and then Greg lit it on fire. That was amazing. I was the only thing I would mention that I don't think got brought up is that if you're on a full lifecycle project, because it sounds like you're on kind of the analytics side of it, if you're on a full lifecycle project, this is a gated process. So reviews happen in stages. So you'll get, a little bit of your project done, and then there's a review, and you'll have someone either green light or red light it, which means that they're going to look at the project and say, okay, you're finding something interesting. I think this model is actually onto something, or I think your approach is valid. And then they're going to move you on to the next phase. So typically you have little bit of data gathering and hypothesis creation. You'll present that. If the review board thinks, okay, you're onto something, or just the team thinks you're onto something, you go on to the next phase where you'll do experimental design. You'll get, sometimes that'll get reviewed because there are some fields where you can't run an experiment without someone actually overseeing it and giving it a green light. So you may have a gate there. And just so think of this, without getting into every single gate and boring everybody, but just think of this as a gated process. And that's really how it should be. It shouldn't be like a big bang at the very end when you're about to deliver. It really should be something that's happening on a regular basis as you reach a phase or a step in the workflow where it's kind of a critical jump. You want to have a gated process. And that's really what you should expect in the larger, sort of more complete projects, or in more mature organizations. You'll start seeing that gated process come in.
Nisha, hopefully that gave you some great insights, a lot of good answers there that I know I'm going to run back and listen to at least more than once. Nisha, is that good? Awesome. Cool. Christian, man, congratulations. I know you got some big news for us too. This is a lot of good news today, man. I'm excited to hear this. Christian, go for it, man.
Yeah, no, today kind of posted on LinkedIn that earlier, but got my acceptance for the Georgia Tech OMSA program, and so that was cool. Been waiting on that for a little while, and it's a different phase for me. I've got the business background, but I thought I could add a little more rigor on the data side, and thanks to this group here and others, it's been just kind of an increasingly enjoyable learning experience. So I'm going to be leaning on y'all probably even further as I get in over my head with some of this stuff. So thanks to everybody here.
Man, congratulations. I absolutely love that, dude. I'm excited for your future and excited for all the amazing things you're going to do, man. So it doesn't look like there's any more questions. So you guys, thanks for hanging out. Guys, I want to say, look, I've interviewed far too many white dudes this month and literally since the beginning of the year. So if you know any women out there who are either astrophysicists, philosophers, especially logicians or ethicists, anybody that knows about quantum computing, just anybody that is published a book in some of these domains, please let me know. If you know them personally, put us in contact. I'd love to get them on the show. Just want to get some more representation. So again, specifically looking for some astrophysicists, some philosophers, ethicists, logicians, or anybody that's into quantum computing. So please holler at me if you know anyone that fits the bill. I'd love to get them on the show. Question here. I'm not going to cut it off just yet. I just saw a question coming at the ultimate last minute from Jacob. Jacob, go for it. Take the floor.
Hi everyone. This is like my, I don't know, I've been coming though, like just hopping and out. So my background is civil engineering. I decided to leave my job last year to transfer to data science. And lucky enough for me, I got an internship with a prop tech startup in the UK. Unpaid though. Sorry about the noise at the background. I'm out of power, so I'm listening to the narrator. It has been quite enjoyable. So I do more of data research. So my intention was going there, learning about data visualization, SQL, and all of that. But I think it actually gave me a leverage to start by learning about data properly in terms of integrity and data governance. But I feel like I'm not growing. So I spent like 4 months. I'm not paid, and I have to get data to do the work I'm not being paid for. And the experience is not that, it's not forthcoming like I anticipated. And so I'm at the crossroad where I have to pay my bills and I don't have something on the side, and essentially I'm not being paid. Now, I applied for a couple of jobs, so I keep getting rejected. Some I get the interview, but I don't get past the first stage. So I'm kind of frustrated. So I actually don't know what to do at this point. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
So audio is coming in a little bit sketchy there. So I'm just going to kind of summarize what you're saying. So you're transitioning to data science, trying to get a job. It's super frustrating trying to get that entry level job. Been going on a bunch of interviews and things are just not, everything's bricks, right? You can't get one in. So all I can say, man, is keep applying. You have to keep attacking, keep sending more resumes out, because it's a numbers game. Because here's the thing though, right? as part of the interview process, there are levers that are within your control that you should optimize for, right? Just submitting a application through a job portal itself, you're just kind of leaving it up to chance that the reviewer is going to pick your resume amongst 1,000 other resumes and then decide to call you and proceed to the, with the process. If you can try to identify technical recruiters, higher level managers in data science for that company on LinkedIn and send them a really well written message highlighting what you can do for them. Or if you can't find them on LinkedIn, well, I mean, let's say they're just not active on LinkedIn, you don't hear back from them on LinkedIn, you can hedge that bet by looking for the company email address in hunter.io and trying to get their email address and sending a well-crafted email message. But essentially anything to get yourself noticed after you hit apply through the corporate website. So don't leave it a chance to have your resume picked. Go out there, reach out to people, and send well-crafted message just to let them know of your interest. Let's hear from Rashad on this one.
Yeah, I remember what this felt like. I had a neuroscience background and I had no job experience. I did a 4-month stint in inside sales when I started. So it's funny because those skills actually helped with what Harpreet is saying right now, which is to do a well-crafted message, target it, and then reverse engineer the company's email address and send them emails. So when I was trying to break into data science, I didn't have a boot camp or anything particularly relevant behind me, but I did have I was doing stuff and I could talk about it. So I crafted emails. I found, I reverse engineered their email addresses. I didn't use LinkedIn really at the time. And as I recall, in 2016, I got like 1 out of 3 people to at least be like, yeah, I'll talk to you for 15 minutes. I would frame it like semi-informational, this looks interesting. Like, I think I could help. Generally, if the person doesn't respond to that, it's fine. It means that they probably wouldn't want to mentor or help you grow anyway. So screw them, go somewhere else. You can think of yourself as the selector. And what you're doing is that you're never going to get 100% hit rate no matter what, but it's okay, because if you do get hit rate, that means you're actually got this subset of people who would care and would respond to like a targeted pitch that you put research and time into. So that's okay. And then you talk to them. As it so happens, I did that, got the interviews. Then I would fail the technical test, but I learned a lot, and then eventually got through. So yeah, I would vouch from personal experience, the targeted outreach approach, talking about the business a bit, mentioning a bit of like why what you've done is relevant to them, and then like ask for 15 to 30 minutes. That's what I did.
There's many levers that are within your control when it comes to the job search process. The thing is just to remove things that are not in your control, right? So you can't control whether or not your actual resume gets picked. You can't control whether or not, they close the position. There's so many factors that just not in your control, but optimize for the ones that are in your control, right? So the biggest leverage, I think, in that situation is doing these type of reach outs. But let's hear from Mark to see what Mark has to say.
Yeah, so this is the approach I took. I was talking to Russell. I don't know if he's on today, about the approach where I essentially take on the persona that I'm a business of one. And instead of looking for a job, I have this skill set and I'm trying to solve a company's problems and selling my services. And then with that mindset, I use what's called a sales funnel. So there's various steps within the sales funnel. And so the last time I was laid off, instead of putting out job applications, I did 2 things. I created content on LinkedIn to drive engagement, to see visibility. And so people saw that I was looking for a job, and then people would send me recommendations for that. And then the second component was kind of what Rashad was saying, was creating very targeted LinkedIn emails. But kind of to add on to that, kind of the strategies I would do is like, all right, what type of company am I looking for? I'm looking for company of this size, work on these type of problems. And then I would identify who's the decision maker for a position, either that's created or not created. And I will identify that decision maker through some LinkedIn stalking, basically, and find like, all right, I want to be into like the insights department. Who's the head of insights for XYZ company? figure out what would be a great pitch for them and give a very targeted pitch. And the key thing is like, it's not about like, hey, I want a job. It's more so, hey, I see you're trying to solve these problems. Your job posting or what I've seen your blog said this. Here's my skill set to make me the best damn person to solve your problem, and really sell it that way. And so the reason why I like the sales funnel component is that now you get actually levers to really think about it. So like, all right, how's my, I'm blanking on the names of the sales funnel, but like awareness of my brand, right? Awareness of my skill set that people want to talk to me. When I'm doing the informational interview, you know, am I qualifying this lead where like actually we're a good fit? The next step is like doing the interview. Am I really being able to describe the value I'm providing to the company, right? And then the final step is like the deal. So like being able to negotiate. And the reason why I like that format is because then I can start tracking like, I'm not really doing well here at this part. Let me ramp up my efforts and focus my efforts here. If I am messing up on like the technical interviews, right? Now I know like I'm being dropped off. There's a leak in this part of the funnel. This is where I'm going to go start focusing on, and allow me to stop running all these directions, be very targeted of what like I'm going to focus on to get the job.
I absolutely love that analogy about the sales funnel. That's really, really good. Mark, thank you so much for that. And when it comes to LinkedIn stalking, I would add a little tip here. You know, when you go to somebody's profile on LinkedIn, they have the activity section. Make sure you peep that activity section. If somebody hasn't done any activity in like 90 days, that's probably a waste of an in-mail credit. So don't go after them. Look for people who are more active. You know, maybe they're active within a few days or within a few hours. That's the prime target, because if somebody's not active for days or weeks at a time, your hit rate's not going to be that great. I wonder if you can, like, I wonder if anybody's actually done this, like just buy ad space on LinkedIn to promote your candidacy, and you can probably target people in markets, and I think you can probably target keywords as well. And if you can add in hiring as one of the keywords, that would be interesting. Try to advertise yourself that you are open to work using LinkedIn ads. Let's hear from Makiko on this. I know Makiko has a lot of experience helping people transition into data science.
Yes, absolutely. At one point in time, Harpreet and I worked together at Data Science Dream Job, where we, connected promising, aspiring data scientists and help them develop the skills. But so I would say that number one, definitely focus on optimizing your bottleneck. So I've kind of made like 2 or 3 pivots. I mean, I guess maybe 3 if you include unemployment, pivoting away from unemployment. So that might be a pivot. But I made kind of like 3 pivots in my career. And, every time I was doing a bunch of activities because I thought I needed to. And when you're first starting out, you kind of do need to balance some kind of exploration with, I won't say exploitation, but trying new things while doing the things that work, doing more of those. And the thing is, when people are getting their first data scientist job, so I've been on the interview panel for a couple different roles, like at different companies, hiring data analysts or data scientists. A lot of the candidates look really the same. Like you would be shocked at how like 100 resumes can just bleed into like 5 resumes. So anything you can kind of do to like differentiate yourself is definitely useful, especially like as Mark talked about, like targeted reaching out. Like that can be a great way to differentiate yourself, because people can like place a face in like sort of a story, to paper, which is really nice. So like at the beginning, it's kind of weird because it's like you have like 100 resumes, everyone sort of looks the same, and then you kind of have to figure out like how to choose. And if you sort of already have some kind of interaction with those resumes or with the people behind them, then that really, really helps. And then the second part, right, is like optimizing your bottleneck. So it seems like you are getting some callbacks, which is great. So one place you could still optimize maybe is your resume / LinkedIn profile. I know for me, for most recently, when I was looking for an MLE job, I was sending out my data scientist resume and I just got nothing, just rejection after rejection after rejection. So I got it. So I was taking this full stack deep learning course. One of the TAs, he does work as an MLE. I was kind of posting the Slack channel going like, oh my God, I'm like, I have no hope. He reached out and he said, let me like look through it. And he was just like, look, this is a very data sciencey resume. He's like, it's a great data science resume, but it is a shit like engineer resume. So he helped me with that. So even if, for example, you could reach out to other data scientists too on LinkedIn, you know, even especially if they are with companies that are hiring. So even if they don't refer you, they can at least tell you like, hey, this is kind of like what the hiring team is looking for. So I would say like those two things are really important. Is, you know, do what you can to sort of differentiate yourself, because in the beginning, everyone looks the same up until they start developing like 2 to 3 years of body of work. And then the second part, you know, is like optimizing your bottlenecks. So for example, if you haven't gone to the technical interviews, I would not be necessarily spending all your time preparing for those. I would be spending time preparing on like generating more opportunities and more interviews. Once you start getting to the technicals, and you feel like you have like that first stage of the pipeline, you know, the first stage of the cycle going, then you can kind of like, you know, change your focus and kind of gradually like move it up, you know. That's because like the other part too, right, is that for me, it's every single job search and as a data scientist, as a data analyst, as an ML engineer, has never not been stressful. It's always been stressful because everyone wants a million things. And if you chase after the 10 million things that they want, it's so easy to burn yourself out. You need to kind of reserve some of that mental and emotional energy for yourself, you know? And so being able to pick the most impactful stage, and the figuring out the most impactful channels will really, really help a lot.
And just be kind of reasonable with your expectations when you apply for a job. Realistically, any single application that you send for, you probably have like a 1% chance of ending up with the job in the end, right? So just temper your expectations with every single resume that you do send out, and update your probability of landing the job as you progress throughout the process, right? But you know, always kind of be rationally optimistic, right? You want to think of the future as a probability distribution that way. But Jacob, hopefully got some good insights there. Just a numbers game, man. Keep plugging away. If you want to come in on the Sunday office hour, we can take a look at your resume, do a little bit more analysis on that. And yeah, if anybody was interested in data science dream job, let me know. I can give you guys a 70% discount on that. So Jacob, thanks again. Great question. Now remember, folks, I need help finding, because like I said, far too many white dudes on the podcast recently. I need to break that chain. So I'm looking specifically for women who have, you know, astrophysicists, game theorists, philosophers, ethicists, logicians, behavioral scientists, preferably ones that have written books. I'd love that. Shout out to Mark for getting me connected with Liz Fosling, by the way. Really, this book is fucking amazing. This book is so good, man. Mark, thank you so much for getting us in touch. I really, really appreciate that. I'm excited to be talking to Liz in a couple of weeks. Next week, I'm talking to author of this book here. Well, co-author, the smaller font name. But looks like there are no other questions. So guys, looking forward to seeing you guys next week. Hopefully you guys are back next week. Hopefully everybody's getting vaccinated and doesn't leave me once once everybody's safe and can go to pubs again. Take care, guys. Remember, you've got one life on this planet. Why not try to do something big? Cheers, everyone.